Hi everyone, I'm here today to talk to you about all of the books that I read in March. I will list them in the description box down below. In no particular order, let's begin with this one, which is Clara The Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is his latest novel. It came out at the beginning of March and I was very intrigued by it. I have loved some of his books and felt a bit about other books of his. I haven't really disliked any of them, but there have been a few that I just haven't really got on with as well. Remains of the Day I enjoyed. It's not my favourite though. Never Let Me Go is my favourite. I feel like there are two camps there and you definitely find yourself in one or the other. Never Let Me Go is a book that has destroyed me on multiple occasions in the best way possible. The only book of his that I haven't read yet is The Buried Giant, which I do have on my shelf and intend to get to at some point. Anyway, this book, Clara The Sun. I imagine that Ishiguro sat down and said to himself, consciously or subconsciously, so my best books, my best-selling books, my most beloved books are Remains of the Day and Never Let Me Go. So what if I just smush them together? Because that's what this book is. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the elements of his previous books that he picked away at in this novel. Some readers I know find that frustrating when authors revisit certain themes again and again, but that is not something that is a bugbear of mine. So this is a book about Klara, who is an AI, an artificial friend, and we open with her in a shop. She's waiting for a family to come and purchase her so that she can go home and be a really good friend to somebody. And we are seeing the novel through her eyes, learning about the world as she learns about the world. And in a way that is very much like many Ishiguro books where the narrator holds back either because they are lying to us or because they just don't know a lot about what's going on in the world around them. Klara is essentially a servant who's gone to a house and she is there to keep the family's secrets in the same way that Stevens, who is the main character in Remains of the Day, is there to keep his boss's secrets, and there are creepy elements to that. Never Let Me Go, without going into spoilers for Never Let Me Go, because it's a book I would never want to spoil for anybody, is about a group of children who are different to the outside world and they're told that they can't really engage with people outside of their perimeters. And they learn why later on, and as they're growing up, they're encouraged to draw a lot and their artwork is going to be put in a gallery, and that's a really prized thing. In this book, science is a really prized thing and people are encouraged to be scientific as a way to show off their humanity and to show how far they have come. So it's a real parallel to Never Let Me Go, reaching for a similar thing, but it's art versus science. This book really reminded me a lot of E.T.A. Hoffmann, who was a writer in the 1700s. He wrote fantastical Gothic things heavily inspired by folklore, and many of them were then adapted into ballet. So he wrote Coppelia, which is about a girl in a shop, a doll who turns into, I was going to say she turns into a human, but she is animated. She becomes real, in inverted commas. And he also wrote The Nutcracker, which is about a young girl who was called Marie, who was then later renamed Clara, who goes into an animated toy world and you're not sure what is real and what is not real. A lot of his work centered around human and magic bringing things to life. And ironically, he wrote those as an answer to what he saw as the pervasive evil enlightenment that was crushing people's imagination. It's quite fun then that Ishiguro has then taken that character of Klara, turned her into a robot, and instead of using magic, he's using science to reach a similar goal to what E.T. Hoffmann was exploring in his own work. Like with Never Let Me Go, this is a novel that is exploring what makes us human. It asks what happens to our humanity if we change the bodily parts of ourselves. How far can we push our bodies to attain something else, something greater? So in some respects, this novel does explore ableism and disability, but I would say it's more in the Gothic Oscar Wilde picture of Dorian Gray kind of way. I didn't enjoy this as much as Never Let Me Go or Remains of the Day, and I did think that the ending kind of dragged a little bit, but when it hit the mark, this book really did hit the mark, and it gave me that aching sad feeling in my soul that Ishiguro's books often give me, because he really does tap into a pure form of truth that is almost painful to look at. So I really love that, and it's definitely my favourite Ishiguro that I've read since reading Never Let Me Go and Remains of the Day. And a book that explores similar things is Show Us Who You Are by Elle McNicoll. I'm not going to speak about this loads here because I've spoken about it in quite a few videos. I read it right at the beginning of the month, and then Elle and I did an event together, which is now public to watch, and I'll link that in the description box down below. But this is a middle grade book about a young girl called Klara. So we've got Greek mythology going on here, because Klara is another name for Persephone, and she goes to her brother's Christmas party and meets her brother's boss's son, and they become friends, and she's fascinated with his father's business, which is creating holograms of people, researching, making AIs to reanimate the souls of people once they've gone. And it's under the pretense of helping people through their grief, but it's one of those organizations that obviously exploits people who are feeling very vulnerable, who have lost people, who would pay anything to see a version of that person again. So this is a book that will it will just to sum up, it will it will hurt you. This is about eugenics. It's about what society values in other people. What parts of a person would they save? What parts would they just conveniently carve out? Klara, our main character, is autistic. Her best friend Adrian has ADHD, and Elle explores all of these things so brilliantly in this book, and it was a pleasure to chat to her about it as well. Two books that I carried over from last month, which I spoke about in a reading vlog, and which had strong starts for me but kind of unraveled a bit, are these two books here. This is The Paper Man by Gallagher Lawson. This is a book that I bought so long ago, right at the beginning of my booktube channel, and I bought it because I know that it's Christopher Alonso's favourite book, or at least one of his favourite books, who was a booktuber who was also around at that time. I don't think he's uploading videos anymore, but I don't know if you do this, but I do this with things. When I'm going through a phase of being obsessed about a particular thing, I'll buy lots of books about that thing, and then I'll read probably most of them actually, but there will be some that linger on my shelves for ages, and I've kind of moved out of that phase. This is when I was very much into magical realism, which is not to say that I have since left magical realism, absolutely not, but I do think that I prefer magical realism in short stories, to have really sharp, short, over-the-top magical worlds that I can really get invested in. And I don't think it's as easy to sustain that over a whole novel. Some authors are very good at it, some are not. This one, I was intrigued by the world building. It's about a boy who is made out of paper. He had an accident when he was younger, and then his father rebuilt him out of paper, and he's left his family who live in the countryside, and he's travelled into the city to try and make a name for himself. But people are exploiting him, and there's lots of parallels here with disability as well, and I really enjoyed that at the beginning. This book also reminded me a little bit of a Dickens novel. It has that Victorian element to it, where the main character, almost each chapter meets a new character, and that's a part of their journey, and then moves on and meets somebody else. I enjoyed that too, but it also made the book feel a little bit formulaic. And on top of that, it meant the book felt as though it didn't really have a sense of direction, which may well be deliberate because the character doesn't have a sense of direction. I just wanted a little bit more permanence to this book. I would have liked to have gone deeper into a lot of the imagery that was explored. It felt a little bit surface for me, which was a shame. And then I read The Beauty of Your Face, which was another book that I mentioned in a blog. And I think I said in that video that I was intrigued by the first chapter, but hadn't been emotionally captivated yet. And unfortunately, that is kind of my feeling for the entire book now that I've finished it too. We start with Afaf, who is the headmistress of the Nuruddin School for Girls, and she's walking down the corridor going to assembly, and then she hears gunshots going off in the distance. So this is about a school shooting, but it's primarily about Afaf and her family, because as soon as that happens, we jump back into her childhood to explore her whole life up until this point. And I particularly loved the parts where she was talking about her childhood and her relationship with her siblings and her parents. But the thing with this book is that when I was reading it, I couldn't not think of A Place for Us by Fatemeh Fahin Mirza, which was my favourite book of 2018. There are so many similarities between these two books. Big differences too, but lots of similarities. And A Place for Us is more literary than this book here. I would say this one is more commercial, more fast-paced, and just given the type of books that I enjoy the most, it's not surprising that I enjoyed Fatemeh's book more. So both are about families that have 5 members. Both of them, that was a weird way of phrasing that. They have 5 members of their family. Both books have a sibling who went missing when they were children, so in the 20 years previously part, and both books jump back and forth between the present day and the past, trying to work out where that sibling went. They're both about immigration and religion as well, though very different, because Fatemeh's book is about the character's parents moving from India to America, and this is about the parents moving from Palestine to America. So it is very different, but both are also talking about the children's relationship with Islam, whether or not the girls in their family want to wear their hijab, and their relationship with religion as they get older. But it was primarily the sibling gone missing, jumping back 20 years in time to the present day, that was the most striking similarity to me between these two books. The thing I think that also let this book down is that in the present day sections, it gives voice to the shooter as well, trying to fill in their backstory and why they're doing this terrible thing, going to a Muslim school to murder Muslim children. It's horrific. And it didn't work for me, those parts. I don't think that there was enough space to try and do that. I mean, this is less than 300 pages, and that is a huge thing to try and do, as well as spanning someone's life over the past 30 years. So yeah, this felt like several books in one, and because of that, I don't think any of the main elements worked, or shone as brightly as perhaps they could have done if the book had focused on one of those things instead. My favourite part of this book, which is also actually something that happens in Fatemeh's book too, is looking at the mental health of Afaf's mother after her sister went missing, and how she treats her children who are still there, her mind focusing instead on this gaping loss instead of the presence of her other children, and how desperately sad that is. So yeah, there were parts of this book that I really enjoyed, but ultimately it wasn't a favourite of mine last month. A favourite of mine from last month, however, was this, which is Passing by Nella Larsen. I just felt my face lit up when I picked it up. I loved it so much. This is a tiny book and a testament to what you can achieve in such a small space. The book is less than 140 pages. I listened to the audiobook of it, narrated by Tessa Thompson, who is in a new adaptation of Passing, which is coming out later this year, and I'm very excited to watch that. This is the novel that The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett is based on. But in Brit Bennett's book, it's 2 sisters who are separated and about their separate lives. In this, it's about 2 friends who knew each other as children and then meet in their late 20s. I think they're in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're living in Harlem in the late 1920s. And they are both lighter-skinned black women who are living very different lives. So one, Claire, has passed over. So she's passing as white. She's married to a white man who knows nothing about her past. And our main character, Irene, is married to a black man who knows everything about her. And Claire desperately wants to reconnect with the black community that she was part of when she was younger. But there is such a danger for her in doing that, because if her husband finds out, then something terrible is going to happen. This book reminded me a little bit of, or a lot actually, of A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. Stella and Blanche, 2 sisters who are living vastly different lives, but are still terrified of the same things. They're just reacting in completely different ways when experiencing that fear. Claire and Irene are doing similar things as well, and I suppose both are set around the same time. And it also reminded me of In the Driver's Seat, which is a tiny book as well that has such a punch at the end. The ending of Passing, spoilers, I'm not going to talk about it, but my goodness, I was just speechless. I was speechless at the end of this book. This book gets under your skin and it makes a home there. It is an amazing, deft exploration of racism and colorism, and you should read it if you have not read it already. something very different. I read The Lost by Claire McGowan, and I read this because I am forever trying to find a series of books that will fill the hole in my heart left by Frida Klein after I finished reading that series by Nikki French. There's only so many times that I can reread that. I need something new, and I hope that this would be that, because it is the beginning of a crime series about a woman called Paula Maguire, who is a forensic psychologist. Yes, a forensic psychologist. And she is from a small town on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. And she has lived in London for a while, but she's come back home because her dad had a fall. So she's come back to look after him and has been given a job in her old hometown. It's about missing girls going missing now, and girls who went missing when she was a teenager. And she's brought onto this case. Now, I don't think this is going to fill the Frida-sized hole in my heart, but I'm definitely going to read the next one as well. Something I will say for this book is that it is trying to explore so many things. So it is exploring Paula's trauma from when she was younger, because she went through a lot of things. It is exploring the Troubles. It is exploring English people coming over to Northern Ireland and not knowing anything about the political situation there, which is her boss, who is English, who has recently moved over there. It is exploring teenage pregnancy and religion and abortion, and all of the political things that knit those subjects together. So it is doing a lot in here, as well as being a crime book. I just didn't think that the crime itself was very satisfactory. I had guessed the end, not from really early on, but it got to a point, you know, where you think it's going to be one person, it's revealed it's not that person. And once that person's out of the way, you're like, okay, right, yes, I see who it is now. But the main character, Paula, she didn't see that for ages. And she was even speaking to this person, and they were trying to tell her, Paula, it was me. And she's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And it was just so frustrating because the penny didn't drop for so long. Very, very annoying. And the very end of this book got a little bit, EastEnders-y to me. Really, the end feels like it should have a doom, 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 doom. And I'm not sure I was a fan of that. I love a bit of drama, but it got a bit too ridiculous. This book also focuses a little bit too much on relationships for my particular liking. I just don't really like it when I'm reading crime and it's about their personal relationship, especially if they're falling a bit into a cliche, having crushes on your boss and you're working in the police force. And it feels a bit tired and done, which is not really the fault of the book as opposed to the fault of the genre. But I just want the crime, I want the crime, and that's all. I don't really have anything else to say about that, but I am going to read the next one in the series, and I do also have a recommendation from someone about a series of books that may be more like Frida Klein, so I will report back on that. Another book I read last month was The Magical Language of Others by E.J. Koh. This was a book that had been selected for my Patreon book club. If you have the means to do so and you would like to support me on Patreon, I will link it in the description box down below. Support on there is so appreciated. It just means that I can spend more time creating free content for everybody on here, on Instagram, making sure all of my content is accessible by creating captions and image descriptions when we're doing bookish games and all of that. And there's some extra content over there, such as a book club. I do writing prompts, text analysis, behind the scenes book writing stuff. Patreon's a platform that I use to support musicians and YouTubers whose work I really love. So if that's something that's of interest to you, I'll link it. If it's not, or you don't have the means to support me over there, please don't worry about it. It's just there if you happen to be interested. So the book that I read last month for Patreon Book Club was The Magical Language of Others. And this is a book that I think I loved the premise of it more than the overall book itself. There were parts of it that just broke my heart into pieces. So this is about Yoonji, who moved from Korea to America with her parents, and then her parents moved back to South Korea and left her and her brother in America when she was a teenager, a young teenager. And she's always said that that was her choice. But then as she's an adult, people are saying to her, it's not a choice, you are a child. And she's having to reevaluate everything she kind of thought about that part of her life. She felt as though she didn't really understand her mother or her mother's form of parenting. And her mum would write to her from Korea in Korean but she couldn't read Korean. So she'd kept those letters in a shoebox. And in the present day, she has rediscovered those letters and she can now read Korean. So she has translated those letters. There are 49 of them and they are the backbone for this book. So throughout this book, she has inserted those letters, both in English and in Korean. And then between those letters, she has written about her childhood. And I couldn't not think about Polly Barton's book, 50 Sounds, which is about translation, her learning Japanese and thinking about her past self almost as a different kind of translation. What kind of vocabulary did your past self have to express themselves? Not in a different language, but in the language that you spoke at the time. And here she's translating her mother's letters, yes, but she's translating the memories that she has of her parents and of her younger self and trying to analyze that through the lens that she now has, having since read the letters her mother sent to her at the time that she couldn't read. She's having that parenting later in life after she's already parented herself because she was experiencing that loss. It's so heartbreaking. I definitely preferred the sections about the letters, but on the whole, really enjoyed this and would definitely recommend it. Finally, a book that I've also mentioned, I think in previous vlogs, is A Still Life by Josie George. This is quite a long one, and this is Josie writing about an entire year of her life, 2018, I think. Yes, so this is a whole year of Josie's life, measured by the seasons that she witnesses out of her window and in person when she goes out in her wheelchair. And it's not just about the seasons that she sees outside in the world, but the seasons of her body. And I've never read a book that discusses body in the way that she does. She sits with the weight of various different things and redistributes that weight and gives it different names depending on how she's feeling each day. So she's chronically ill, disabled. She has been misdiagnosed by doctors throughout her life, which she talks about. She talks about her pain as the weather of her body. And I never heard that metaphor before. I never considered it in that way. And there's something very freeing about that without romanticizing pain, which I don't think she does either, but just thinking about it in a different way, in a non-confrontational way, instead of fighting with our bodies and with pain, which I think we're taught to do from a very young age. This is not about fixing or getting better. This is about living, about listening to your body and then adjusting your day accordingly. I found so much comfort and also a lot of difficult things. That's not an opposite, comfort and difficult. Some of this book was comforting and some of it was very difficult to read. Hannah and I have been talking about Disability Readathon, which is this month, but I read this in March, and the exhaustion of reading so many books about disability when you are a disabled person yourself. It's a lot, but I also feel so privileged to read these voices and to talk about them. So yeah, I don't know what my conclusion is apart from I enjoyed this book very much and I would heartily recommend it. And if you don't follow Josie on social media, you absolutely should do, and you should definitely go and check out her weather scarves that she makes every year because they're incredible. So those are all the books that I read in March. Let me know what books you read last month, any you particularly loved, any you didn't love so much. I would love to know in a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these ones too. I hope you're having a good start to the week and I will talk to you very soon. Lots of love. Bye.